This is a really bad idea.
I'm going into space, Daddy, and there's nothing you can do to stop me. Fire! Hello to all you crafters out there in the Craftiverse. Hope you're having a great day. Today we have Era Bentley from Bentley House Minis. I discovered her channel in the last few months when I wanted to start building a diorama. And her teaching methods and overall artistry, not to mention her just determination to do these huge projects, was very inspiring to me. So I was thrilled when she said yes to come on the Podcraft. So yeah, let's get going.
Craft Pod 13.
Good morning. Hello, Era. How are you?
I'm good.
Please let me know that I'm saying your name correctly.
Yes, it's Era. It's kind of like Ava, which is the more common name, but with an R.
It's cool. I've never heard it before. It's a great name.
Thank you.
So you are like a master at building dollhouses. I think they're dollhouses, right? Are they dioramas or dollhouses? I'm trying to settle a bet here.
Okay. I think I know who the bet is with.
Yes.
So I do work on dollhouses, but I also make what I call room boxes, which some people also refer to as dioramas. So the difference would be a dollhouse looks like a complete house, whereas a room box would be something taken from a house. So it would be like a section of a house, and you don't always have to finish the outside of it. So I think dollhouse is used whenever you put dolls into something. So I think it kind of depends on whether there are what you would refer to as dolls. I don't know. Ah,
gotcha. I'm so happy with your answer because I'm pretty sure that I have won my bet. So
good.
Coming from an expert, we'll see if this material goes anywhere with this guy that I have this bet with. But you've made like one of the things that fascinates me about your channel is that you do huge projects, and what I mean by huge is that you really span across quite a long time and more than several videos. Actually, I don't have a full count because just the amount of material that's on your channel, I haven't been able to go through all of it. I've gone through quite a good bit and learned a lot from it. But tell me about how the whole process of just why you tackle such huge projects.
Well, sometimes I refer to this as a mistake because I actually started my journey with my Addams Family Mansion, which has been one of the biggest projects to date on my channel. It took me 11 years to complete, and it was the first project I started on, which I do not suggest doing for anyone who's wanting to get started. I suggest doing something like a room box. It's much faster to complete. You get that feeling of finishing something and being happy with something much faster than 11 years. But what I do on my channel, or what I try to do, is I enjoy working on big projects. I enjoy kind of having this huge overview of what I want to accomplish, but that's kind of hard to make a cohesive video out of that, I guess. And so I try to focus on individual projects for the video, which could still possibly help somebody else who's wanting to, say, make a couch. But the couch I'm making is for my specific larger project. So it continues my big project, but can also work as a single video tutorial for someone else who wants to make a couch. So that's kind of how I view the videos that I make.
Yeah, that's pretty brilliant, kind of encapsulating it into a smaller, like, just something that has a beginning, middle, and end, but is part of the larger whole. And so 11 years. Now, on the Addams Family mansion, right?
Right, yes.
And in that, you created the house, the exterior, the interior, and also all of the furnishings, I believe, and also some, you've sculpted some figures for it also, correct?
Yes. Well, originally I wasn't a doll person. I just kind of the general generic dolls that are available at the price point that I could afford, I didn't really care for. But once I had started creating the house, specifically the Addams family themselves, I felt like the house was empty without the figures. So it wasn't in my original plan to create them. I was thinking at one point that I would have someone make them for me, but I don't know if you've ever looked at the price tags on custom made dolls.
I have not. Give me a general idea.
For a custom order single doll, you could be, depending on who you're ordering from, but the artist that I was looking at would have been between $300 to $400 per doll. And for a family of 7, that was going to be quite a price tag.
Wow, yeah, absolutely. I'm sure they look great. Maybe I'm in the wrong business. But yeah, that's fantastic. So over this 11-year process, did you hadn't started your video journey quite yet, correct?
Correct. I was working on a blog. So I don't feel like blogs are as popular anymore, but when I started, they were incredibly popular. And so I was sharing photos and I was sharing my process, and sometimes I would share tutorials of the process of me walking through something I was making. It of course wasn't as in detail because video, it's just easier to show something than it is in photographs. But then I kind of got lonely a little bit in what I was doing. I had an online group, and hold on one second. My dog is playing with a squeaky toy. I'm going to go take it away from her.
That's okay. My cat was crying at the window a little while ago, so I had to isolate her also. She's in solitary confinement at the moment, which is our mudroom.
Craft Pod 13.
So I was starting to feel a little bit lonely in the miniatures hobby art form. I like to say both hobby and art form because I believe they are both. So I like to make that distinction.
I agree.
I had an online group that I was talking with and people all over the world. And I really enjoyed getting to know them, and we had like little competitions and things. But the owner of that website wasn't able to keep up the money for paying for the website, so it closed. And I just felt really lonely. I didn't know anybody else who was doing what I was doing. And part of the fun, I think, of miniatures is sharing. And people going, oh, how did you make this? Or, that looks so cool. Or, how, just being excited about what you're working on. And when you don't have that other part, it just feels really lonely. Partly I do it for myself, but then at the same time, you want to share. I think that's all art forms. You want to share at some point, I believe.
Absolutely. You want people to see the work that you're doing and also like get feedback on it. And sometimes I'm so surprised at just the level of artistry that's out there. Some of the people that are commenting on stuff that I'm making, and I'm sure you may have experienced this also, they're amazing at what they do.
I totally agree. And I think it's amazing that we now have, there's pluses and minuses to the internet, of course, but one of the amazing things that's come out of it is that people can share. And I feel like I have friends all over the world now, people I would never have met in my life.
Yes.
But we all share this common interest of miniatures. And I just think it's really cool that we can all come together on the internet. And sometimes I get to meet people in person. So that's really fun. But it still feels like a community that I was missing.
Oh, absolutely. Not only is it a community, but in my opinion, the crafting community is the coolest community. And I actually, just the other day, I had someone comment on one of my videos, and I looked at their channel. They told me they were also doing YouTube stuff. And I looked at their channel, and they're not doing crafting at all. They do like mini documentaries. And really, really cool stuff. But I looked through the comment section, and I was shocked. I had forgotten that happens on the internet, because 99% of the comments that I get, and maybe you share this also, are very positive and supportive, and the whole crafting community is so cool. And I had forgotten that there's this other side of the internet that's just really there's a lot of vitriol and just, you know, venom sort of in it. How is your audience?
Like you said, I would even say 99.9% positivity. It's very rare that I get a comment that is a hate comment. And oftentimes I can tell right away it's a person who's just very unhappy. And of course that makes me sad that, you know, that they're going through that. But I totally agree. I think the creative community just, I mean, across, I think most channels that I watch, people are just excited to support each other and to be a part of that. And I also enjoy going to other channels and supporting other creators, because there are so many creators out there doing things that I would have never thought of. And I'm just constantly inspired by others. And I feel like if I had just stayed in my shell and I had never shared anything and I had never found anyone else, what would my art look like? It would not even be close to what it is, because I would not have had those inspirations and encouragements from other artists.
Oh, absolutely. Not only that, but just the impetus to like finish a project. I mean, really, one of the reasons I started doing it was for sort of a self-help mode, you know, helping myself out and just giving myself something to focus on. I had always crafted, but never with the intensity and intention that having to do a video really puts on you. I mean, you're locked into like, I need to finish this. So it's really impressive to me that you started this, back to the Addams Family mansion, that you started this really massive project. In 11 years, I haven't even heard of anyone doing a project for that long. So it's wild. But
well, I will say there's a lot of life that happened during that 11 years. So there was a lot of time it was not being touched, but yeah. So, and I think I think I can count that in the amount of time it took me to do that project, because sometimes you do need those breaks, and that counts as time rejuvenating to get back into the creative mindset.
Yeah, it's sort of like a well that you run dry, and really what you have to do is, sometimes I think a lot of people who are crafting, and I have been guilty of this myself, because all of this is a learning journey. So as I'm learning, I realize that once like a well has like dried up, the best thing you can do is, instead of trying to pull more stuff out of that, is to move on to something else, even if it's completely different. And then you just wait for that well to fill up, and you'll naturally have this like yearning to go back to it, and then there's more creativity to be had that's just kind of waiting for you there. Do you experience something similar to that?
Yeah, that's my exact reason why I have so many projects going on at one time on my channel, because I can get frustrated with one project or get tired of one project and turn around and there's another one that I haven't touched for usually at least a month or a month and a half, and I'm right back into it, excited to get going on it. And another thing you were saying earlier was the encouragement to finish a project. It's funny because sometimes I feel like the people who watch my channel are more passionate about my projects than I am at some point. And that has been so encouraging. Like I actually don't even know if I would have finished the Addams Family project if I had not shared it and if I had been doing it on my own. Because the excitement and the passion that came from the comments and the people who wanted to share ideas and the people who, I even have had people send in things for my project that are now in the museum in Arizona. And it's just been, it almost feels like a community project. I know I'm doing most of the work, but people have a shared passion for it, and that's been really cool to see.
Okay, hold on. Let's see. There's a couple of things that you said that I need some clarification on. You mentioned a museum in Arizona, and you mentioned that people are sending you stuff to add to your project. Can you elaborate on those? I'm fascinated.
Yes. So the Addams Family project is now at a museum in Arizona called the Miniature Time Machine. It's in Tucson. Yeah, and I did a few videos on the process of finding out the insurance cost of a project like that, which I thought would be a really boring video, but it ended up being pretty interesting, I think, just to sit there and figure out what is 11 years worth of work worth.
You're talking about to ship it out there.
Well, the museum had to insure it. And so I had to give them an insurance price so that if something happened to it and it wasn't returned to me, what the insurance income would be from that. And that was really difficult. And I do think even now after I went through all of that process, I do think I undervalued my time. But it's hard to value my time on that project because when I started, I was very much, didn't know what I was doing, made quite a few mistakes. And so what is that time worth versus the time where I knew what I was doing and I was working faster, but I was working more accurately? Or do I just count it all as the same? I don't know. And so it's it's hard to calculate that. And I don't actually know the actual hours that went into any of it because I don't think I want to know that, honestly.
No, I know. Keeping a log would be frightening.
Right.
Of actual hours work. So, and this was someone who the museum contacted you? They saw your channel via YouTube, or how did this go down?
Well, I think possibly in my finale video where I did the final tour of the Addams Family house, I had discussed wanting it to go into a museum. It had kind of been a dream of mine. And it had kind of sat around my studio for a while. And I was like, you know what? I actually kind of want to figure out if this is a possibility. And I had heard of the Mini Time Machine before. They're a pretty well-known museum in Arizona. And so I just decided to email them and ask them, what is the process? What does it look like? Do I have to get my own insurance? Because I figured that would be my first step, is that I would have to get my own insurance. And so when I started talking to them, they said they were very interested in having it in their museum. And so we just started talking and kind of grew from there and figuring out the logistics and everything.
Okay, that is so freaking super cool. I love it. That's amazing. And have you been?
Yeah, so the cost to ship, if you hold on one second, I'm going to go put my dog up. She's just jingling all over the place.
Okay, I just want to take a moment while Era is putting her pooch in timeout to say that if you're going to be in Tucson, Arizona, you can go see Era Bentley's Addams Family Mini Mansion at the Mini Time Machine Museum of Miniatures. Man, that's a lot of minis in one sentence. It's going to be up until October 30th of 2022, how appropriate, and I'm sure it would be amazing to actually see this thing in real life. Okay, let's get back to the podcast. So, Era, have you gone to Arizona? Have you been to the Mini Time Machine to see your Addams Family mansion there?
Well, I found out that the price to ship the house out there was going to be $1,000 to ship it out there, and then $1,000 to bring it back. And that was for a professional art shipping service, which I totally understand. It's a big thing. So I decided to drive it out there myself, because then I could set it up and I could also see it in the museum, which, is a pretty big moment, I think, for any artist to see their work shown.
Oh my goodness, absolutely. But that still must have been, even though it's not like you just grabbed this whole giant house, threw it in your car and started driving, you must have had to go through quite a process to pack it up yourself, correct?
Yes, and I did a whole video on that, on how to package a dollhouse, and I didn't quite know how to do it at the beginning, but I think the video ended up looking pretty good as far as like a good way to package something like that, because it can be a pretty difficult thing to make sure is secure and safe, especially if you're working on something that has the exterior finished as well, because you spend so much time on siding and on roofing and on the windows, and one wrong move could destroy some of that work.
Did you have a little repair kit with you just in case?
I did, yes. I had paint, I had glue, I had paintbrushes, everything I needed.
I had a feeling. So how long, you're in Texas, how long did it take you to get out there?
It took us, it's a 14-hour drive out there.
Whoa.
And we had to make the drive all in one because I did not want to park at a hotel and leave the house in the car in the parking lot and risk it disappearing. I'm like, it would be the time where they would steal my car and it would go missing, and I would be like, take the car, just leave the house. Leave the miniatures, I don't care about the car. So I just didn't want to risk it. So we got up, I think at like 4 a.m. Texas time. Now we had a benefit because there was a 2-hour time difference in our benefit. But we got up at 4 a.m. and I had to get to the museum before it closed to drop it off, to know that it was safe and in their storage.
Wow. And so you didn't unpack it for them and set it up? They did all of that themselves?
Well, I had to get there before they closed on Friday.
I see.
Or sorry, before they closed on Saturday. And then I taught a class there on Sunday, which was really cool because that kind of helped offset some of the costs of driving out there and the hotel, because I was able to charge for the class. And I also got to meet a few of my subscribers that wanted to take the class, which was really cool.
Oh, super cool.
Yeah. And then the next day after that, the museum is closed on that day for the purpose of setting up projects and cleaning and taking down projects that need to be switched out. So I had the entire day to work on setting up the house, and that was really nice. It was really calm and peaceful, which was good because I was a mess. So
I really want to go to this museum now, and hopefully if anyone's out there in Arizona, they know about it, and if you don't know about it, go check it out. But it would be such a trip. How was the rest of the museum?
It was amazing. I honestly, even though I had looked into the museum, obviously, and researched it, I did not realize how much was there and how much was on display. And my favorite part of the museum was the historical area, where it had old German doll houses from like the 1800s and things like that. And just seeing how much of a history this art form has, how far it goes back, and how much around the world, it goes. And it's just interesting to see that so many cultures, so many people throughout history have just been fascinated by tiny interiors, tiny furniture, tiny people.
There's just something about minis that just, I don't know, they're so captivating. Even a movie, have you ever seen Dinner with Schmucks?
No, I haven't.
It's sort of, there's one character in there, Steve Carell, who he uses mice, and like he does this mice taxidermy and then builds all sorts of little things. It's quite interesting. If you haven't seen it, you might get a kick out of it. But there's just something fascinating to just about everyone, I think, about miniature stuff. Yeah. I don't know why.
It's amazing how many times it shows up in media. And you can guarantee anytime I'm watching a movie and there's a dollhouse, like I'm like yelling, dollhouse! And we have to like rewind so I can look and see what it is and how they put it together. And one of the movies that I recently watched was Knives Out. And they had like 2 dollhouses. There were like a couple of different miniature houses. And of course the house itself in Knives Out is amazing. But, it's just cool to see them appear. And it's funny, when most of the time when a dollhouse is a main item in a scene, it's seen as like something creepy and spooky. I've seen that more and more, which I think is kind of funny, but
Right. Well, so this leads me to a nice segue into there is a dollhouse or a doll town in Beetlejuice, and you ended up building a Beetlejuice house. And I don't even know if you're, and I wanna say something real quick, that I have watched a bunch of your videos. I feel like some of the questions I'm asking, you're like, yeah, I have a video on that, and I missed it because, well, no, it's quite all right. I've tried to put in as much time doing research on you and checking out your stuff because I've learned so much from you. But there's just such a wealth of material on your channel. It's sort of like my friend Craftsman, where it's like I maybe have made it through most of his videos, but I'm not even sure, and I've been watching his channel for a long time. But so you have a Beetlejuice house that you have done. Have you completed that fully or not?
No, I'm really just kind of in the starting phases of Beetlejuice house. I didn't want to start it until after the Addams Family was complete. I kind of have a rule on my channel where I have one pop culture project, and I have one channel project, which is kind of fed by subscribers' ideas and kind of moves forward in that way. So I had to make sure Addams Family was completely finished before I could start Beetlejuice and fully focus on it. But I have half of the first floor with walls up, and then I have the base, which I had custom built for me. I have one of the sections of the base worked on, and I'm just kind of going slow with it. And a lot of people are very interested in the fact that I'm building it from scratch, because the Addams Family house was all from kits.
I see.
So there were parts of the Addams Family house that I custom built, but the Beetlejuice house is going to be all custom built. And that's been a really interesting process to think through, because when you have a kit, it's already been thought through for you, so that how you're going to access things or how you're going to put it together. But when you're building from scratch, I realized pretty quickly that it was going to be hard to see into this house once it was completed. And so I came up with a magnet wall system. So the house can be completely enclosed, where you just see the exterior, or you can remove certain walls to see inside the house. So that's been kind of fun to figure out.
Yeah, I saw that particular video, and that's quite brilliant, where basically well, I'm not going to explain it to people. Why don't you explain it to them?
So basically I just built an insert into a wall, and there's magnets on one of the walls. I think it's on the exterior part of the wall. And then there's pin nails on the house itself. And two magnets were a little bit too strong. I was afraid they were going to rip out. So having the magnet magnetized to the pin nail didn't create too much of a force. And so it ended up being, I mean, it sticks pretty well. I'm not afraid of any walls falling out, so.
Nice. And when you say it was too strong, it might pull out, you mean that you're insetting it into the wall and then covering the magnet with something, and you were afraid it was going to pull through whatever you're covering it with.
Yeah, I'm covering the magnet and the pin nails with paper. And that's just to kind of help keep it in place. Of course, there's glue as well. But the two magnets, with the force of them, like, you know, pulling on each other, there is a possibility, because glue gets old, you know, and I'm trying to think of, in the long run, what's the best decision? What's going to make this dollhouse last for years, so that I'm not repairing things, you know, every year.
Yes.
The best option was to reduce that, I don't know if it's a force, or reduce that pull that the magnets had towards each other. And to do that, I just had some pin nails that I've had, and that worked pretty well, because they're fairly flat, so they weren't too obtrusive.
That adds a whole different level to the design, by having to figure out, like, okay, what is removable, and also how to safely remove a wall without collapsing something. I mean, it's a house. It's like anything. There's supporting structures. And what is, like, when you scratch build something, and it's okay if you're not 100% sure on this answer, but are you using like foam or wood or combinations of the two? Have you settled on anything for like your main base structure that's like your favorite crafting material?
Well, for the base itself, what the house is going to sit on, I did invest in some plywood. With wood prices, I do feel like invest is the right word for that.
It's insane, right?
Yeah. So I did get some plywood for that because I had very specific ideas on what I wanted that to look like. I'm very blessed in the fact that I have a friend who works with wood, and so I drew out what I wanted and he created the base for me, which was great. So that is very strong, and I'm not worried about that crumbling at all under whatever weight I put on top of it. But the house structure is made of foam board, and I'm very specifically using foam board from the craft store as opposed to foam board from the dollar store. I've used foam board from the dollar store many times. I love it. It's cheap. However, the foam board from the craft store is more structurally strong. And that is what's going to help my walls stay up and also combat some of the warping that can happen with foam board. That's probably been one of my biggest things I've had to fight is warping. Yes. But then I also have wood dowels that are on each corner of the foam board walls. And kind of the purpose behind that is, have you ever seen how they build like a multi-tiered cake where they put the dowels in the cake to help the next level up have a little bit more support? So it's a little bit along that idea that as it goes up, it will have these wood supports so that I don't have so much weight on the individual pieces of foam board. Even though the foam board is strong, I wanted to, I call myself an over gluer. I'm also an over supporter, I guess, because I want to make sure that once I get to the attic floor, I'm not seeing all the work underneath being crunched or destroyed that I've worked hard on.
I certainly don't think that's overdoing it at all. I think that's just, you know, thinking things through and being, you know, committed to not having a huge disaster. If you're going to put that much time into something, yes, you don't want to 3 months down the line just have the whole thing fall apart. That does not bode well for a channel. By the way, congratulations on 100,000 subscribers. That's pretty amazing.
Thank you.
You just crossed this recently, right?
Yes, and that was honestly my ultimate goal for like my entire lifetime. And the fact that we hit it so, I mean, I have it written down somewhere that says like ultimate goal 100K. And the fact that we hit it so quickly is, it makes me a little bit emotional, but it's just kind of mind-boggling just to have that support and to have so many people want to watch me building what I feel like, you know, 11 years ago, nobody cared about. Right. It's just such a change and a transition.
No, it's absolutely amazing, and it's staggering. Like, a lot of times my wife will tell me, like, you know, I'll you know, as we go through, sometimes you know, when you're creating stuff for YouTube, it's easy to get fixated on numbers at times, and you know what someone will deem a low number is actually not. And she always tells me to, like, you know, if I say whatever, let's just make it easy and say 1,000 people, you know, like, you know, well, that's nothing, 1,000 subscribers to some, but she's always like, well, visualize 1,000 people who are watching your stuff, and it changes your perspective. So even if you have 250 subscribers or 150 subscribers, which I had for the longest time, even imagining 150 people who are watching your content really changes things, at least in my mind. So for you, hitting that beautiful goal of like 100,000 people saw your stuff and said like, oh, I want to see more of what Era is doing. I mean, that's just phenomenal. Yeah,
it as I said, mind-boggling. And the interesting thing is I've had a lot of comments from people who specifically let me know, I don't watch miniatures, but I enjoy your channel. And so it's interesting that it's not just miniaturists, because that's what I kind of figured would happen, because I have a very tutorial based style. So anything that I'm making, doesn't matter what project it's on, I will say probably 95% of my videos are tutorials where I'm showing exactly do this, paint this, glue this, do this. And there's people who they tell me in the comments, I'm never going to make this. Never in my life am I going to make something like this, but I love watching it. And that is so cool. Just to think that there's so many people who will never do it, who don't even craft sometimes, but they enjoy the videos.
Yeah, I guess it's similar to people who watch cooking shows who are not actually watching for a recipe.
Yeah, that would be me.
Yeah, it's fascinating that I personally, this is how I found your channel. Was well, first of all, it was really through Nick from Abandoned Miniatures, and but I started watching it and I became fascinated with the whole idea of diorama, and I was like, well, this looks challenging, let me try to expand out. And I really had no idea how challenging it is, and to be honest, I can say that pretty much for every project that I do. Like, I am so happy that I can reset back to being ignorant when I start a project, to where I'm like, oh yeah, this is gonna be fine, it's not gonna be a problem, and then suddenly you're 5 days into it and you're like, what have I done to myself? So I watched your channel to help me through a lot of stumbles that I had when I was building this particular diorama, my first one that I've ever done. And so thank you for all your help. I know you weren't there personally, but I watched it as tutorials, and you do a fantastic job on guiding people through step by step on how to do things.
Oh, well, thank you. And that's one of my favorite comments to receive, is when I know that something I've done has helped somebody else. And I think it's cool because I'm just kind of making whatever I need for my projects, but it's amazing how many times it's helpful. And maybe whoever's watching is not making a couch, but they're making something else, and something about how to fold the fabric works for them. And so I'm really glad it helped you.
I'm going to just guess here. You said earlier that you try to have something that's sort of from pop culture, but then you also have something that's original or something that's specific to your channel. So I'm going to take a guess and say that the captain's quarters is performing that function at the moment?
Yes. Yes.
And tell me a little bit, or tell us a little bit about what is the captain's quarters? How did it come about? All that good stuff.
So the captain's quarters started after the abandoned coffee shop finished up, and that was kind of my first channel project. I didn't really have a term for it at that point, but I saw how many people got invested in the abandoned coffee shop and how many people had ideas for it. And by the time I was finished with that project, there was an entire story, which I did write the story that goes along with the abandoned coffee shop.
Oh, nice.
And that's when I really got excited about writing stories that go along with my projects. So after that was done, I put up I guess it was like a question. I had two choices, and they were kind of based off of miniatures that I had. And one miniature that I had a lot of were model ships. I don't know what it is about model ships, but I love them. And when they're in miniature, they're even cuter. I don't know what it is. But anytime I see them, if I can afford them, I purchase them. And I probably had, I don't know, maybe 6 or 7. So when I say a lot, I mean, that's a lot for having miniature model ships, right? So I have a few more now, but people were really excited about that idea. And so I went forward with that, not really knowing what it was going to become, but I did a planning video over that and kind of planned the captain's quarters. And I wanted it to be a captain that was obsessed with making model ships. And so it's 2 levels, and so the top is the captain's living quarters, and the bottom is a showroom for all of these miniature model ships.
So it's an original idea, and it's the interior of a ship, or I kind of felt like it might be a spaceship, or am I completely off the mark?
Well, no, you're not. I had, from the beginning, this twist in my mind of how I wanted to okay, my original plan was to create the captain's quarters on the channel, and then one day take that 2-story captain's quarters and then slide it into a whole nother diorama, which was the spaceship all around it. Oh, cool. And just kind of like blow everyone's mind, right? Be like, when did you make that?
That's super cool.
But I realized pretty quickly that I don't have a lot of extra time outside of what I'm filming for my videos. And that was going to be very difficult for me to achieve the way I wanted to. So I ended up getting really burnt out on the captain's quarters. And I do enjoy being pretty real with my audience on when I'm getting tired of my project, because that's something that every person goes through.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, there's that exciting beginning where you're like, oh, I have a new idea, I want to do all the things, and you get going. And then there's the exciting end where you wrap it up. But there's all these little points in the middle where you're just tired of looking at it because there's so many things you know you need to do. So I knew I needed to make a video over the captain's quarters because it'd been a while. But instead of working on the captain's quarters itself, I made a panel, and it was like a spaceship panel. And I talked about my idea to put the captain's quarters inside of a spaceship. Like, it had been preserved from the time it was in a ship. It had lasted so long where it was preserved now inside of a spaceship.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, so it was kind of a good video just to talk about my feelings, and but it also renewed my excitement, which is something I often suggest to people who are going through the same thing, where they're just like, I'm tired of my project, I don't want to touch it. I'm like, okay, well, maybe you could put a new spin on it. What's a new aspect? What's a new detail you can add that kind of is either a twist or it adds a new perspective? And by changing this into a spaceship, it gave me a whole new realm to play in. Not just 17th century, but space and how the two spaces work with each other.
Have you ever heard of the ship of Theseus?
I don't think so.
So basically, it's just this. It's sort of like this hypothetical story. I think, I don't know. I'm trying to just recall this from memory, but basically, it starts off where you replace one plank on the ship, and over time, over 100 years or whatever, every piece of the ship is replaced, sort of like our bodies every 7 years, right? And then in the end, it's sort of a philosophical question. Well, what is the ship? And I guess in the end, it's the idea of it, but it's sort of the captain's quarters. What you were explaining to me just now sort of reminds me of that like his or her, I think I might have seen it in the end, it became a female. The captain is a female. Her ship is, over time, has been replaced so much. And is she passing down like generation to generation, the captain? Is it changing?
Well, part of the story, I actually had another artist create the captain for me, which was a really cool experience because it was kind of scary because I was giving up a lot of control. Yes. Because the captain is a big character in the captain's quarters. Yes. It's the captain's quarters. But I had a hard time figuring out who the captain was. And so I put this entire project into somebody else's hands, which I didn't even know who the captain was going to be, even while the captain was being created. And to the point to where I opened the box in front of the camera and saw the captain for the first time.
And you had no idea that it was going to be a woman?
No.
Wow.
I at one point we had joked about it could have even been like a cyclops, because we're talking about space, right? Sure. Space exploration.
I love cyclops.
And so you look at Star Trek and Star Wars and all the creatures and characters that come from those. I really just gave her all out control, which the captain is actually not human. She looks human, but she is not. She's 200 and something years old. And if you shine a UV light on her, she has different colors on her skin because she's in the process of changing forms into the seer. So, and this was all created, this story was all created by the artist and her, I don't know if you want to add this in, but her Facebook page is Cornucopia of Madness, and her daughters, they all came up with the story together, which I think is so cool that it was a family project for them.
Love it.
So all of that's coming together to start to create the story of the captain's quarters, which I do need to write. And I enjoy that part, kind of coming up with stories, because that's really what miniatures are. You're telling a story, which is really a lot of what art is telling a story, whatever art form you choose.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So having a written story to go with it is kind of something that's become a little bit expected, I guess, of my channel projects, my original projects. Because like Beetlejuice already has a story, right? Yes. The Addams Family, they already have a story. Mm-hmm. So the miniature projects that come out of my channel, they need a story. And usually that's the last video of those projects is the story. And I read the story to everybody. So.
Oh, cool. I'm going to have to try to go back and check out one of the actual readings, because I missed those. But I am 100% with you. Like, basically, to me, everything is story. I mean, even if it's just a painting on the wall, you know, an abstract painting. A lot of people sometimes, you know, look at abstract paintings and like, I just don't get it. But, you know, you're trying to make up this own story of whatever. There's no correct or incorrect way to look at it. And that's what I love about certain open-ended pieces of artwork. It's where it's each person's interpretation of it is what specifically matters. And I have been sort of playing with this idea, which I did with my diorama, which is I am purposefully leaking a few things in there, but kind of leaving other things open-ended where whoever's seeing it can kind of fill in the story however they think it's ending. So, so that's fascinating to me. I love the fact that you're fascinated with stories and are a writer. That's sort of close to my heart.
Well, I think that ends up being why I create more creepy, I guess.
I love creepy.
I would say, yeah. I think that's why I end up creating more creepy projects, or projects that are a little bit more dilapidated. Because if you think about it, and you're driving down a road and you come across all these brand new homes, and they're all cookie cutter and they're all perfect and they all have flowers in the front yard. You typically don't have any thoughts about them. You just drive by. But then you drive down a road that has a house where the siding's falling off and the windows are broken, and you know there's something growing in the front yard that you can't even recognize, and you sit there and you think, what is the story? What happened here? What happened at this place? And I think that's what fascinates me, because you can tell stories with aging. You know, you can put a spot of mold or a spot of dirt that indicates something happened there.
Yes.
And it's so much easier to tell stories and also cover up mistakes with aging.
Oh, God, yes. Yeah. It's so hard to do something shiny and brand new. And you're right. It is sort of the gloss. It's like water off a duck's back. But the aging of something, like I really love the look of old motels, like the signage, and just old tiki motels are fascinating to me. I think they're beautiful, and they're all abandoned pretty much.
I like to watch YouTube channels where they play indie horror games, and the amount of times that they're set in old motels it's just like 80% of them seem to be set in an old motel. But I watch them because I love the visuals. Well, first of all, I love the story of the game. I can't play them myself because I'm a chicken and I wouldn't make it through. But I like to watch other people make them and discover the story and discover what happened to this hotel. Who's still here? What's going on? And so those are the kind of things that really pique my interest.
Oh, that's hilarious. You have, for those particular type of YouTube videos, you're the audience that you were just talking about, where you're like, I will never actually do this, but I love watching it. That's funny. So you said something about earlier about people sending you stuff, and obviously the captain would be the probably the pinnacle of that. But tell me about some of the how you coordinated people sending you stuff for your house, and how they get it in the correct scale, and how you go about picking stuff, if I'm even close to on the mark of what's happening here.
Right. No, you are. I'll say the first project that we started this on would be the captain's quarters, because people wanted to participate. And I was a little worried about just, saying okay, just send whatever you want, because then there would be an issue where some of the things would not be used because they didn't go along with the storyline, or someone would make the same thing as somebody else. And I didn't want people to put all that effort into something and not see it be in a project that they really loved. So the captain's quarters has this really immaculate bookshelf that goes around a spiral staircase. And one thing I dislike making in miniature is books. So I was like, you know what? I think we could do this. I think we could organize people making books to go onto the captain's bookshelf. And I guess in my mind, when I started it, I was just kind of thinking, okay, we just have, because I was telling people it needed to be a certain size. So I gave them a measurement so that it would fit on the shelf, and that helped everyone stay in scale. And then, so I just thought I'd kind of be getting books that were generic books, but I was very wrong. I got books from around the world in different languages. Some of them had words on the inside. Some of them had gold on the outside. Wow. Some of them had personal meanings. Some people sent me a letter that went along explaining why this book was important, the history behind it, why it's important to them. And I've kept all those letters. And so I have books from all over the world, and each one is its own individual art piece. And I say this all the time on my channel, that's my favorite part of the project, and I'm not lying, and I'm not, trying to make people feel good. It is, because it's hundreds of tiny art pieces, and some of them were people's first miniatures, and they sent them to me, and I'm going to get emotional about it, but so what an amazing collection, I think, to have in one spot for a bookshelf in a little project on my channel. So it feels like a very big honor to have those.
Yeah, and it's amazing. I'm always a little scared to kind of open up that door. Like I think it's fantastic, but yeah, I'm always scared because I don't want to, have people send stuff just like you're saying, and then you're like, well, this doesn't fit, or maybe it's not good enough for what, and I'm not really even sure because I haven't fully thought it through, but I just don't want to like offend anyone. And I had even thought about at some point being like, I would love to feature a certain, ask people to send stuff and then feature something that someone's built, but I'm really worried that other people, if they don't see what they've done, they'll not be happy with that. And
I started with the caveat that I was allowed to age anything that they sent in.
Nice.
That anything they sent in, that I was able to change it to work for my project. And there were a lot of people who sent in doubts saying, I don't know if this is good enough. I tried, this is my first miniature. And there were some that I did kind of have to help glue back together. But there are so many books and so many different levels of skill, but when they're together, they make such a cohesive and cool looking bookshelf because they are all different. If I had made every single book, it would look like every single book was from the same seller, right? Because I have a very specific style, but they were made from so many different materials. I mean, materials that aren't even in America, right? Because they were made in Ireland and made in China and sent all the way over. And so it makes the bookshelf look like there are over 100 different books from different parts of the world made by different people, because they are.
Exactly like real books, because none come from the same place. That's such a brilliant way to actually include your audience in something that you need such differentiation in. That's fantastic.
Well, and we're doing it for the Beetlejuice house too. I had to really think hard about that one, because I had already had emails from people who were wanting to make things, which I really appreciate. But if I let everyone make everything, I wouldn't have anything left to make videos over.
Right.
So I wanted to focus that again, like we had focused on the books. So you had talked about the attic diorama in the movie Beetlejuice. And so that's what people are sending in. They're sending in houses to go on the attic diorama.
Oh, it's like Bentley house Inception. It's a
right.
Yes, it's a diorama inside a diorama. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. I mean, I have a collection of tiny houses now, made again from all over the world. And there are I already told everyone, I was like, there's going to be some that don't make it onto the final diorama. Right. Because I already knew there were going to be more than would fit. But I have a selection, enough of a selection that I can pick ones that are similar scales and will work together. But I wanted to make sure everyone knew that their houses would still go into the project because they put time into that. And so I am working on ways to incorporate the houses that aren't used on the diorama. I have an idea that I will have another magnet removable wall, but it won't remove to show the interior. It will remove to show shelves of tiny houses that were created.
Oh, cool.
And so they would still be displayed and they would still be part of the diorama and part of the experience, I think, of it being my project, right? Because I don't want it to look like the house that was in the film. I want it to look like a house that I built based off of, inspired by the film.
So in the Beetlejuice house, it sort of changes, right? During the film. So how do you decide, what exactly you're going to build?
I had to pick a point in the movie. I had to pick what I felt was the most interesting point of the movie. And part of the reason that I'm doing Beetlejuice is because it's so different from the Addams Family. Addams Family house was very earth tones and a lot of spider webs and cobwebs, a lot of brown, which is my favorite color, but I wanted to push myself. So in the beginning of the movie, it's a farmhouse, which would probably be a little bit more like the Addams Family house, not as dark and not as many cobwebs and spider webs. But I felt like doing the Beetlejuice house towards the end of the movie where things had been changed, like the fireplace had transformed and Delia had just sunk her claws into every single wall, would be such an explosion of color and weird shapes that I've never created before, weird textures, like just figuring out the textures has been a whole new thing in itself. That seemed so much more interesting and so much more different from my last pop culture project that's where I wanted to set the time frame.
Nice. Yeah, I love Delia. Catherine O'Hara, which I recently found out she also is the voice of Sally in The Nightmare Before Christmas, which I didn't know.
Oh. I knew she was one of the kids in there, but I didn't know she was also Sally.
Yeah, she's one of is it Lock, Stock, and Barrel, I believe? Yeah, she's one of them. I believe Pee Wee Herman, Paul Rubens is another one, and Danny Elfman actually is the third kid. I don't know which one. Yeah. But yeah, that's fascinating about like how you chose to pick certain things on the house. So let me ask you this question. I know that you don't like making books, but what is sort of your favorite part of crafting?
I started out crafting and creating furniture. I have a love of furniture in my real life. I just love unique pieces, and to create those in miniature and really not have any boundaries on what I can create because they're, this big. It was really nice. And so I do have an online store. So most of the items in there are furniture pieces. And I'm starting to do some room boxes. So I think I would say that I really love furniture, and then I love architecture, creating interesting shaped spaces. So those are probably my favorite things.
Do you have an architecture background?
I do. I went to I went to architecture school, but I worked in the architecture field for 4 years, but I quickly learned that I did not want to be an architect. I enjoyed the school process where, for example, we made a project that was make a light tower for a fictional character. Loved those projects, right? Sounds right up my alley. But then I got working in the real world, and it was like, okay, you need to draw 10 doors on this hallway, and then you need to make a door schedule. And I hated it, just to say. I love the people, but the process was it wasn't for me.
It seems stressful.
It was a different type of stress. It wasn't that it was hard. I think it's harder for a creative person who has all these tools and is working in a field where you can be so creative. But when it comes to architecture, you start out as an architectural intern, which means you draw what everyone else tells you to draw. Depending on what firm you go with, when you become an architect, depending on how much they can pay for insurance, you may still be doing the same thing, but your title is architect. You may not be doing any of the designing. And when I saw the path it was going to take, and the school and the testing and the hours to get maybe to where one day I might be able to design something, I didn't have the passion to get there.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So I decided to teach for a while. I taught art, and I really enjoyed that. And that's kind of when I started up my YouTube channel. And I got back into, but models. So making models, but they ended up being dollhouses, and that passion for this reignited. And I'm so glad that it's growing, because it means I can actually make money at what I originally loved about what I went to school for.
Yeah, that's fantastic. On the last podcraft that I was doing, I was talking to Nordmakes, and we talked a little bit about architectural stuff. And one of the things that we talked about was, to me, the coolest thing about being an architect is getting to build the little models, and that everything is CAD now. So there's very few people who are actually like doing the models. There still are some, but
right.
To me, I just love all the mini stuff. So you mentioned your furniture and your store, and you do have a second YouTube channel, correct? What is that?
So Bentley House Kits is my second store, and it is just instructional videos on how to put my kits together. And so while my YouTube channel is going and growing, I wanted to also start some kind of miniature business, because as much as we love YouTube, it's not a promise, right? So any day YouTube could decide they don't like me, they don't want to push my videos out, and my channel could be gone. YouTube could close down, and that's gone. So I wanted to do something that I had control over, and that I love, and I do love creating kits. And it's almost kind of like my own version of merch. It's not t-shirts or hats or anything, but there's several times where I make something on my channel, and you can find that in my store. So if you don't want to cut it and figure out all the math to, figure out how to fit it together, you can buy the kit, and you can build what I'm building on my store. Because I've laser cut it.
That is super creative. I mean, and my God, where do you find the time?
I don't do the dishes. I don't do the laundry.
Okay, a good partner. I see. Okay.
Right. Yes. Yes, I do have a wonderful husband who supports me, and has always been supportive of everything I've wanted to do.
It makes all the difference in the world. Without my wife supporting me, literally and figuratively, I wouldn't be able to do what I'm doing at the moment. So yeah, that's a wonderful thing. Let me ask you this: are there other things with the dwindling amount of time and minutes that you have left in your day? Is there other things that you're interested in? Well,
I do love to paint. Actually, my channel started out as an art channel. I thought more people would be interested in art, watching me paint, and I really liked oil pastels. I know it's like the hated art craft. It's the hated art material of the art world, but I love it for some reason.
Pastels are cool.
And yeah, and so I started doing that, and because I don't think there was a huge interest in miniatures in my personal life, I didn't think there would be that big of an interest online. And then I posted one of my first miniature videos, and it like got way more views than my art videos. And I was like, oh, maybe people do like this. So that's kind of how that happened. But I still do like to paint, and it's kind of a code on my channel. If you see me doing a painting video, because a lot of times I'll paint in miniature, so it still fits on my channel. If I'm doing a painting video, it means I don't want to touch another miniature for at least a week.
Gotcha.
I just want to sit and paint. That's when I've hit my boundary of I need to do something else. So if I'm doing a painting video, that's when I needed to stop and just paint.
Gotcha. How many do you have a schedule that you're releasing videos on, or how is that?
I release a video. I try to at least release a video every Friday. But then the second Friday of the month, I do a live stream instead of a video. And that kind of takes out the editing time. Well, it takes out the creating time and the editing time, because I'm only creating and putting up a video those 2 hours that I'm live streaming. But it's during that week, so one of those weeks would be this week, that I work on my store. And so I actually am making a video, but it's an instructional video for a kit that's coming out soon. And then I'm, doing all the photography and getting the listing ready for my store. So it's still a busy week, but it gives me a break from some other things. So
yeah, just a little something else to do. And I just have a couple of more small things, because we've been going a little bit, but I would love to ask you. Like, I saw that you have like a new studio, not fully a new studio, but you've expanded your studio a bit. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Well, because I have the channel and the store, things were kind of piling up on each other, and I would be, for example, working on the Beetlejuice project, which the project takes up my entire desk. And then of course you have the tools and the materials and everything, and so it just becomes this huge mess. Well, then I would get orders, which I needed to work on, because those are people paying for a service. And so I'd have to put everything away, do everything for my shop, get the orders into the mail, and then I could get Beetlejuice back out. But then of course I'd have to get the tools back out, remember which paints I was using, and vice versa. I would just be trying to get the orders done so I could get my project back out so I could continue filming for that. So they just kept getting in the way of each other. And as my store grows, I'm buying more machines. I have 3D printers, and I have 2 laser cutters now.
Wow.
And so it's growing, which is great, but all of that takes space, and I had a very limited amount. I already have the biggest room in the house. I didn't want to take somebody else's room.
It's also loud, right?
Yes.
You can't really run certain machines while you're recording your videos.
That was getting to me. I did find on weeks where I was running the laser a lot. I mean, it was 3 feet from my desk. And that was convenient because I could change out the material pretty easily.
Right.
But the sound of the pumps and the vents and everything was getting to me, and I was finding myself being a little bit snappier towards people and just being a little bit more frustrated at the end of the day, which is not good. So now it's kind of around the corner. It's so much quieter. I can still monitor it to make sure that nothing's on fire, but it's not in my immediate earshot, which is fantastic. So the new addition is right next to my original studio, but it is store only. So I have a clear space to package, to put kits together, and I don't have to stop what I'm doing on my YouTube channel projects to go work on the store. And I can just leave all the store stuff there and come over here and work on my YouTube projects, which already has just been amazing to have that separated.
Yeah, not having that interruption of having to like take everything down, switch everything out, and then start up again. It's amazing how much with when you're dealing with creative stuff, how much just changing something like that can really, it takes a while to sort of prime the pump of your mind again to kind of get going. So yeah, it seems nice that you now have a separate space for those two things, which are very different things.
Yes.
And you're in a different mindset to use them. So okay, one last thing. Let me ask you. It's obvious to me that you've probably always been a creative person all your life, a creative kid. When did you, or like how did you start crafting, or like when did you start to get the bug for it?
That's a good question. I think, like you said, I've always been a creative kid. Whenever there was an art project or a drawing project, or, you know, the seldom times when your teacher would assign you a diorama, I was like, yes, yes, let's do this. But I really don't think I picked up the love of making models until college. And as you mentioned, the architectural models, we had to create those. And typically you would have a group of people. So someone would do the drawing, someone would do the presentation, and then someone would do the model. And I volunteered for the model every time. And there were lots of people who were glad that I was volunteering for the model.
Oh, really?
Because it ended up taking the most time.
Right.
It's just very time intensive. So it would be like several all-nighters in a row. I can't do that now, but when I was younger, I would do those all-nighters, but I was so in love with it. And so I think that's when the passion for making small miniatures and models really started. And I kind of skipped over this, but while I was working in the architecture field, I was missing that, and I found a local theater set designer and reached out to her. And so I started building models of her theater sets.
Oh, that is so cool. Oh, that is
that was cool. Really fun. And so she could take these sets to the actual set builders, and they knew exactly, because they were to scale. They were 1/4 inch scale. So they could literally measure off the model and build what she needed them to build. And that was so refreshing to me. I would come home from working in the architecture office just defeated, and I would sit down and I would just work on this model and just be in heaven working on it.
I have a question for you about scale, because man, I am like terrible with math, and I mean, what would be a good place for me to learn more about that? Do you have like, I don't know, I'm not even sure how to phrase the question. That's how lost I am.
I do have a video over scale, and I go through the major dollhouse scales, although there are train scales, model trains, and then there's fashion doll scale, which is typically larger than dollhouse scale. So I go over the major dollhouse scales. I have a chart that you can print out, and because I know I have lots of friends and subscribers that aren't that big into measuring, I also provide a way for you to use scale without having to measure everything, which involves your really complicated and intense brain, which can compare human forms to objects and know whether they are right or not.
Oh, I love this. This is exactly what I need. That's perfect. That's perfect. The diorama that I built, I mean, I measured stuff, but man, I did it all by eye, because I was just like, I'm already in over my head, and I can't figure it out. And actually, I switched to metric to do it, because it just, I get it. I was always like, I'm so terrible at measuring everything that I do. And then as soon as I switched to metric, I was like, oh, got it. Understood. Do you use metric or imperial?
I use imperial because I was trained through architecture school, and that's all we used. So I actually have like all of my fractions and decimals like on my wall.
Oh, freaking fractions kill me.
So that's just how my brain works, because that's how I was trained in all of my drawings and things like that. But I really, in the scale video that I created, I really wanted people to know that if you don't care for fractions or doing math, that shouldn't be a boundary that keeps you from making miniatures. You can still go forward, and if your brain, if you look at your figure and you look at what you've created and it looks right, then it's right. And you don't have to sit there and just be worried that it's wrong, because your brain knows. You're studying every day, right? In real life, you walk by a chair and you understand that chair looks correct next to a person.
Oh, absolutely.
If it was smaller, you would say that's a small chair. If it was larger, you'd be like, wow, that's a big chair. Your brain can do that.
Oh, that's brilliant. It's true. Everyone is an expert with sight. I mean, it's the thing that we use the most, and it's like someone looking at a painting and they can tell immediately they may not have an artistic bone in their body, which I actually don't agree with, because I think everyone's artistic, but they may not have developed that, but they can tell you instantly if something looks off in a painting, and they may not even know what it is, but it's just our eyes. We have become like experts in visual. So that's an amazing correlation for you to make and to be able to like express it. And I know what the next video I'm going to watch on YouTube is.
Well, in that video, I also talk about Phoebe Buffay scale. I don't know if you've watched Friends before.
I get the reference now.
Yeah. So there's an episode where Monica has a dollhouse, and it's perfect, and it's in scale, and Phoebe brings all these things to play with, right? And she has this dog that's huge, and Monica has this discussion about how it's out of scale, but then Phoebe comes back with her own dollhouse where nothing's in scale, just everything's all over the place. But which dollhouse is more exciting? Which one is more fun? Which is the one you want to have, right?
Yeah.
And so even if you aren't in scale, or you don't want to be in scale, you can still make a fun project, and that's okay too.
It's phenomenal that you're giving people permission to just like be creative and not be so worried, because it hamstrings people certain things. Like I have done enough projects in my life to where when I started the diorama that I was doing, and knowing like there was quite a moment where I was like, oh, how are we going to figure out scale? And I was just like, I'm going to figure it out by looking at it. So
exactly.
And I do enough stuff with that, but there are a lot of people who aren't as familiar with these processes. So it's really cool that you're giving them permission to do that. And so, you know what, before we go, is there anything you want to add or anything you want to say?
I'll just add that I'm really appreciative of this growing creative miniature community, and the people who are just kind of making it their own, giving this permission to everyone that if you want to create a dollhouse, it's okay. If you want to create a diorama, it's okay. If you want to make something that's not traditional Victorian with the fancy little chairs, it's okay.
Era, this was a fantastic conversation. I feel like once again I've learned so much from you. You're just a wealth of knowledge, and I am so thankful that you decided to come on the podcast.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I always appreciate talking to other creatives, so thank you.
Well, we'll talk again at some point, I would hope, and I'll be watching your channel. And again, thank you.
I'll be watching your channel as well, and I look forward to seeing you win that argument.
Oh, as soon as I leave here, somebody's getting the news.
The crap.